Before I left for a haircut, I had a graph here of the production possibilities frontier in your textbook. That's a good definition of the production possibilities frontier. Let me say a few things about this graph. Basically, it illustrates our choices between chicken noodle broth in cups and minestrone in cups. And remember, we started with an island with a bottle of water, a dry mix box of chicken noodle broth, and a can of condensed or concentrated minestrone that we also had to mix with water to make soup. Students often argue about, well, if we're really hungry, we can dilute the mix a little bit. And yeah, that's fine. You can choose whatever you want. The only constraint is that whatever you choose, you have to end up with two products, because the production possibilities frontier is a model, the first model we're studying, that presents the possible production points between two goods or two services, for that matter, could be. And basically two, because we're stuck with two dimensions. So it's just a matter of being practical. So as long as you end up with two products, it could be, you know, more soup if you dilute it here, or more minestrone if you, more broth or more minestrone if you dilute it on this side. That's fine, as long as you end up with two products and the same principles apply. The first thing is that we're illustrating all possible production points. In today's world, we're often, you're exposed to, you know, infotainment on TV, and I'm talking about the news, so-called news that you often see on TV, and that's fine if you treat it as entertainment, but mainly if we're approaching this class, as I want you to as a scientist, and you're asked to list the choices, you have to list the choices. You can't just on your own start editorializing and say, well, you know, I'm just going to list the choices that seem reasonable or plausible or recommendable or anything like that. As an economist, you're asked to list the choices, and you list all the choices, starting from all chicken noodle broth and no minestrone to all minestrone, 6 cups of minestrone, and no chicken noodle broth. Students often want to guess that the optimum point must be somewhere in the middle. No, not at all. As economists, you can choose any point on the curve, but which point on the curve to choose, that falls on other folks, politicians, lawyers, professionals, and amateurs, and all the trades and crafts. Your priest or your pastor also. In any case, the graph itself divides, I call it frontier, rather frontera in Spanish, rather than curve, because it acts like a border between two areas. So it divides the graph between what is impossible out here, impossible. Another word often used is unfeasible, and the area here, which is possible, or feasible. So that's why rather than curve, I like to call it frontera or frontier, a border. Notice that I will use the word curve throughout the course, whether it's a straight line or in fact a curve. I'll always call it a curve. But often, like in this case, I will say it's a straight line curve. Hopefully that won't confuse you too much. The area that's possible and feasible in itself can be a little bit further divided, but it can be further divided. And the curve itself, or the straight line itself, it's possible and efficient. And the area in here, inside the curve, is possible, feasible, but inefficient. Wasteful, wasteful. I don't know if all this is coming on the screen there, but I just wrote, but inefficient, wasteful. So ideally, as an economist, you want to be on the efficient frontier. If you are inside this frontier, that means that you are being wasteful because you can produce more than what you're producing. And so you are being wasteful with some of the resources, some of the inputs that you have available. So if you're producing 1 cup of each, for example, well, you can still produce 1 cup of the chicken noodle broth, but produce more, this point or here, more of the minestrone. Or the same thing, you can stay with 1 cup of minestrone and still produce more chicken noodle broth. Or you can go diagonal and you can produce more of both, let's say 2 cups of each. So that's how you know you're being wasteful. You have a bunch of inputs, resources that are being left behind you and could have been used in production. You will say that if you are here producing all chicken noodle broth and no minestrone, you're actually already leaving a whole can of condensed concentrated minestrone behind, and you're not using it, so you're also being wasteful. Well, you know you're on the curve, and you know you're not being wasteful if to produce more of one product, you have to produce less of the other. For example, if we're here 4 cups of chicken noodle broth, and you want to produce a cup of minestrone, or let's say 1.5 cups of minestrone, that's possible. Yeah, that's totally possible. You can move to the right, but if you move to the right, you also have to move down. So you move from this point to this point. You will gain 1.5 cups of minestrone soup, but you will lose in the exchange. You will have to give up a cup of chicken noodle broth. And the same thing, you can go in the opposite direction from any point. Now let me pick this point here. 2 cups of chicken noodle broth and 3 cups of minestrone. Well, you wanna make some more chicken noodle broth. Can you do that? You sure can. You can move up, but if you want to move up, you also have to move to the left. And so you can make, instead of 2 cups, 3 cups of chicken noodle broth, but you have to give up in exchange 1.5 cups of minestrone. The concepts that we're seeing here are mainly scarcity. That's what I'm writing down if you can't read it on the whiteboard. Scarcity because we cannot produce 4 of each. Unfortunately, this area is impossible. Why can't we produce 4 of each? Because we do not have enough inputs or resources or factors of production. So it shows scarcity, and it shows by showing scarcity, it shows what we can produce with what we have, and it illustrates, in the invisible ink I have here, trade-offs, comma, opportunity costs. And the definition for opportunity cost, I'll go ahead and write it down, even though you also have it in your textbook, but I want to be very precise. Opportunity cost is what you give up to do or to get something. Opportunity cost is what you give up to do or to get something. Often you'll give up several things. And so to be precise, change markers, to be precise, what we say is if you're giving up several things, we want you to choose one. So opportunity cost of doing or getting something is the highest ranked alternative. The opportunity cost of doing or getting something is the highest ranked alternative, however you spell that. So in other words, you rank everything that you're giving up, and the top one on that list, on the things that you're giving up, that is your opportunity cost. Here we don't have to worry about that because we only have 2 goods, 2 products. So the opportunity cost of gaining one is losing the other, and vice versa.